My son stayed out late. I got angry, but the message he sent after made me regret it for the rest of my life. The sound of water gushed loudly in the sink, greasy dishes clanking together noisily. Julia, 39 years old, with dark circles under her eyes and trembling hands, tried to suppress the pain in her left shoulder. Her back ached after 8 hours standing at the cashier counter in a small supermarket near Elmwood neighborhood. The harsh white light from the kitchen lamp shone down on her face, dulled by cigarette smoke. On a small shelf nearby, her phone vibrated. New message from Nicholas, 7:12 p.m. Mom, I'm playing soccer with James for a bit. I'll head home soon. We're near the park. Julia froze. Soap suds clung to her middle finger, still dripping, as she squinted at the screen, nose slightly crooked, tilting her head as if she couldn't believe what she was reading. Playing. I'm stuck at home scrubbing dishes like a fool, and you're out playing, she muttered bitterly. She dialed. The phone barely rang for 3 seconds before Nicholas picked up. Hi Mom. Get home right now. Julia nearly screamed into the phone. But Mom. No buts. I didn't give birth to you so you could turn into a useless street kid like the rest of them. You think I work myself to the bone so you can go play soccer? Get back here. Right now. Silence on the other end. Just the sound of shallow breathing and a faint, whisper like, okay. Julia hung up. Didn't bother listening further. She slammed the phone down on the old wooden table, nearly knocking over the half-finished glass of water. Her lips tightened, chin trembling, eyes clouded with rage. The anger inside her didn't come from a single act, but from a long line of built-up frustrations. Her son, her only child, was increasingly becoming a walking embarrassment. Lazy. Timid. Weak. Always shrinking back like some scared little girl. 12 years old and still can't look people in the eye, stammers when he speaks. God, why did I give birth to something so pathetic? That voice wasn't spoken aloud, but it echoed violently in Julia's mind like war drums. She grabbed a dish towel and scrubbed her hands hard, as if trying to wipe away the stench of her son's weakness. A sudden knock on the door. It was Melissa, the friendly chubby neighbor from downstairs, hair curly and messy. Hi Julia, she said, holding a small box of cookies. I baked a few and thought I'd share. Oh, did I just hear you yelling at Nicholas? Julia exhaled sharply, trying to hold back her irritation. Yeah. He texted me saying he's out playing soccer with James. Kids these days have no sense of respect or discipline. Melissa raised an eyebrow, attempting a smile. James is my son. He's a sweet kid. He really likes Nicholas. I think it's good they play together. What I need is for him to focus on his studies, not run around the streets scraping his knees and tearing his clothes, Julia replied, her voice hard as stone. Melissa went quiet, eyes lingering on Julia for a few seconds before nodding lightly. Well, I'll just leave the cookies here. Eat something to keep your strength up. I'll head back down. The door closed. Julia remained standing, uninterested in the cookies. All she could picture was a small, pale boy, always stammering and jerking his head. And then that strange habit that drove her mad, blinking rapidly, making odd, meaningless sounds. Once, during dinner with guests, he let out a series of, noises like a trapped animal. Julia was so mortified she nearly knocked over the soup bowl. That night, she dragged him into the bathroom and hissed through gritted teeth, "If you ever do that again in front of people, I swear I'll lock you in your room for a week." A cold breeze slipped through the window crack. Julia tightened the old scarf around her neck. She didn't bother turning on the heater. June nights in this area were starting to get chilly, but the cold inside her felt worse. She glanced at the clock. 7:42 p.m. I told him to come home immediately. That damn kid. She picked up the phone, ready to call again, but stopped herself. No. Let him be scared. Let him stand out in the cold and learn his lesson. Julia walked to the living room. The small space reeked of old smoke and rotting wood. Only one photo hung on the wall, her and Nicholas when he was a toddler, a rare smile shared between mother and son, taken when he turned 3. Julia frowned at the picture, bitterness in her gaze. His father was the same. Full of empty promises, then vanished. All men are like that. 8:03 p.m. Still no sign of Nicholas. Julia's lips pressed tightly together, her cheek twitching slightly. Her eyes scanned outside the window. No one. Not until nearly 8:30 did Julia hear soft footsteps in the hallway. She stood up but didn't open the door. She wanted him to do it himself. To feel the guilt. The doorknob turned slowly. The door creaked open, and Nicholas stepped in. His hair was messy, t-shirt muddy, knees scraped, a fresh scratch trickling blood on his shin. He looked at his mother for a brief moment, then dropped his head. Julia crossed her arms, voice like a whip. "What time is it?" Nicholas mumbled, 8:30. "You still know the time? I thought you forgot what a damn clock is. Look at your shirt, it's filthy like a rag. What were you doing, wrestling?" I tripped on the sidewalk," Nicholas said softly, eyes downcast. "Tripped?" Julia sneered. "You were probably running like a damn maniac. Go shower. Then go study. Don't skip a single word." Nicholas flinched but didn't argue, silently walking toward the bathroom. His old sneakers were left crooked by the door, soles caked in wet dirt. Julia didn't ask if he was hurt. Didn't offer a word of comfort. She looked at the shoes, then turned away. He brought it on himself. Let him deal with it. Behind the bathroom door, the water started running. But mixed in with that, was a faint sound, a muffled sob, swallowed down. Julia didn't hear it. Or if she did, she had long since trained herself to ignore it. The small house sank into a dim yellow light. The kitchen lamp stayed on, but the living room lights were off. Julia sat on the edge of the old sofa, head resting on her arm, back stiff, eyes locked on the bathroom door that remained slightly ajar. After the water stopped, silence took over completely. The door creaked. Nicholas stepped out, hair wet, wearing thin summer pajamas. On his feet were worn plastic slippers. He didn't lift his head to look at his mother, didn't say a word. Julia glanced at him. The scrape on his leg had been cleaned but still looked raw. There was a small cut under his chin. She saw it, frowned, but said nothing. She swallowed down the rare urge to ask if he was okay, as if it were a weakness she couldn't afford. "Go to your room and study," she said, voice devoid of warmth. "Yes, ma'am." Nicholas timidly walked past the living room, entering the small room at the end of the hallway. The sound of a chair being pulled out was soft. Julia remained seated, listening, as if trying to catch him turning on the TV or doodling instead of studying. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. No sound, except for the scratch of pen on paper and the faint whisper of the night wind. She got up, walked straight to his room, didn't knock. Pushed the door open gently. Nicholas was sitting upright, doing geometry problems, eyes fixed on his notebook. He flinched when he saw her. I'm studying," he said quickly. Julia crossed her arms. "What are you writing?" "Geometry problems. Miss Elizabeth told us to redo the polygon area worksheet. Can you do it?" I think so." "Don't think. Just do it. Keep daydreaming and you'll end up sweeping the streets for a living." Nicholas lowered his head. His fingers clenched the notebook cover, as if trying to hide inside it. Julia looked around. The room was small, bare. One desk, a crooked bookshelf, a narrow bed with faded blue sheets. On the wall were drawing scribbles of things she had once ordered taken down, but he kept sneaking them back up. "Why are you still keeping this crap? Drawing won't make you any smarter," she had once said when he proudly showed her a drawing of a singing dragon. She had crumpled it right in front of him. Back then, Nicholas had said nothing. Just like now. Julia walked out. Closed the door gently, but with no warmth. To her, nothing that just happened was worth remembering. A child does wrong, they get punished. That's how it works. Kindness only spoils them more. Back in the kitchen, Melissa knocked again. "Julia? I'm coming up for a sec." "Hope it's okay," she said through the door. Julia opened it, not looking pleased. "What is it now?" I saw Nicholas looked kind of tired." "Is he okay?" Julia frowned. "You came up here just to ask that?" "Well. James came home and said Nicholas fell and cried a little. He got pushed while they were playing. Just slipped. Cried. Again. God," Julia hissed through clenched teeth. 12 years old and still crying like a baby. Melissa frowned. "He's just a child. Everyone has moments of weakness." "No. Children are only weak if adults allow them to be. I don't want him to grow up afraid of the world." "But Julia, maybe he needs to be listened to more than scolded. I say this with good intentions. Please don't be upset." Julia looked at her neighbor with a cold, blank stare. "I don't need anyone teaching me how to be a mother." Melissa exhaled. She nodded and stepped back. "All right. I just thought, maybe if he got a hug, he wouldn't be so scared. I'll go now." The door closed again. Julia remained still, her hand tightening, then relaxing. She walked to her bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out a box of pills hidden behind a stack of clothes. A small, white tranquilizer. She took one with a glass of water. Darkness surrounded her. In the small room, Nicholas was still studying. But his eyes were red. He read the assignment prompt, but the words blurred. He scratched out the same line again and again, then set the pencil down. He remembered the soccer game earlier. James had nudged him not hard, just at the moment Nicholas's neck had jerked slightly from a tick, causing him to lose balance. He fell in the dirt. Mud stained his shirt. He cried not from pain, but from the laughter. One boy yelled. "There goes the glitch boy again." James helped him up and whispered, "Don't mind them. They're idiots." But all Nicholas wanted was to disappear. He used to think that maybe if he just tried harder, if he could stop those weird, ugh sounds, if he didn't blink so much, maybe then his mom would love him more. But the harder he tried, the more he failed. The noises came on their own, like invaders that never warned before striking. His mother's voice echoed from the other room like a knife. "Plays all day, can't focus in school. I swear, I want to smash the mirror when I see that face." Nicholas curled up. He pulled the blanket over his head, but her voice cut through it. In the middle of the night, Julia woke up from the cold. She went to the kitchen for water and passed by her son's room. The desk lamp was still on. She pushed the door open. Nicholas was slumped over the desk, asleep with his head on his arm. Beside him, his notebook was stained with tear-blurred writing. He still held a broken pencil in his hand. Julia looked at him for a few seconds. No emotion. Then turned away and closed the door. "This kid's getting more and more out of control," she muttered, walking back to her room. Outside, wind howled through the cracks in the windows. That night, not another word was spoken in the house. Julia sat in the living room, the flickering light from the TV playing across her face. The news was showing footage of a fire at a nearby industrial park, but she wasn't watching. Her mind drifted back to a piece of the past she had tried to bury forever. Nicholas began showing strange signs when he turned 6. At first, it was mild neck jerks, like he was being bitten by a mosquito and couldn't reach it. Then came the blinking. Then repetitive, meaningless sounds, tongue clicks, snorts, soft, noises out of nowhere. He's probably just mimicking someone, Julia once told his homeroom teacher, Ms. Walker, when called in for a meeting. No, ma'am, Ms. Walker said gently. We think it's time to see a doctor. It may be a tic disorder. Julia frowned. Tic? Are you saying my son's mentally ill? No, I'm not saying that, Walker replied calmly. Just that, if we can intervene early, things could be easier for both of you. Julia left the school that day feeling heavy. That afternoon, she took Nicholas to see a pediatric neurologist, Dr. Daniel Scott, a tall, balding man with a soft voice and eyes that never quite met the parents'. After a 30-minute exam, he said, Nicholas has a mild form of Tourette syndrome. It's not severe, but it needs monitoring. Julia was stunned. What? Tourette's. A neurological disorder that causes motor and vocal tics. It's not rare, Ms. Julia. You're saying, it's not serious. Not dangerous. But if he's under psychological stress or mocked, it could worsen. The key is not to shame him. Accept it as part of who he is. Julia said nothing. Then, dryly, fine. But I want you not to say that word in public. No one else needs to know. Dr. Scott raised an eyebrow. I understand. But hiding it won't help. I said what I said. She led her son out of the clinic without looking back once. You have to sit up straight. Don't let people see you twitching like that. That was when Julia began training Nicholas. Every night after school, she made him sit in front of a mirror. Fix your expression. Don't blink. Don't shake your head. I'll count to 30. You mustn't move. He tried. His eyes watered from forcing stillness. Finally, when he couldn't take it, he let out a strained, ugh, and blinked uncontrollably. Julia slammed the table. No. Again. But Mom, my neck hurts. No excuses. You have to learn control if you want respect. One time, at the grocery store, Nicholas let out a tic while standing at the bakery. A woman turned and whispered to her husband, something's wrong with that kid. The man nodded. Julia overheard. Her face darkened. She yanked Nicholas's arm. We're leaving, she snapped. The walk home was silent and tense. The moment they stepped inside, Julia didn't say a word. She slapped him. Nicholas froze. He didn't cry. Just looked at her with confused eyes. I'm sorry, she said afterward, with no emotion. I just want what's best for you. Another time, she enrolled him in a kids' acting class she found online. Actors have to control their expressions. Maybe this'll help with your tics. The teacher, a red-haired woman named Karen Miller, spoke quickly and seemed eccentric. She observed Nicholas for a bit, then said, he's sensitive. But if pressured, it might backfire. Julia frowned. Just teach the program. I don't need a psychology lecture. Karen smiled faintly. Sometimes, the program doesn't fit every child, ma'am. Julia didn't respond. Nicholas attended 3 classes. Not because he hated it, but because every time he failed to perform the way Julia expected, she scolded him in front of the group. Julia remembered the last time she tried taking Nicholas to a friend's house, Teresa, a college friend. Their sons were the same age. Julia hoped being around a normal kid would help fix him. Dinner went fine, until Nicholas made one of his, sounds while eating soup. Teresa's son burst out laughing, clapping. What language is he speaking, Mom? Julia felt like boiling water had been poured down her neck. Teresa smiled awkwardly and tried to soothe the situation. Maybe just a little reflex. But Julia stood up, grabbed her son's hand, and said, "We don't need to stay another second." On the bus ride home, Julia said nothing. Nicholas sat with his head down, hands clenched in his lap. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. Julia didn't reply. That night, she stood in the kitchen under dim light. She lit a cigarette, then put it away. Her hand trembled. She couldn't silence the voice in her head, "He's an embarrassment. Every time he does that, I feel like I'm being exposed." She remembered when he was little, always humming to himself. His voice wasn't good, but it had something unique. Now, for months, she hadn't heard him sing at all. Because the boy had learned to stay silent. A survival instinct. Julia opened the drawer. Took out an old follow-up appointment slip for Dr. Scott, dated over a year ago. She never went back. The paper was crumpled, with a mouse-chewed corner. The doctor's signature still visible. She stared at it, then crushed it in her hand and threw it in the trash. "Maybe he turned out like this because I wasn't strict enough," she said, as if to justify herself. Kids raised with softness just turn out rotten. That night, in restless sleep, Julia dreamed of a little boy. He stood alone in the schoolyard, hands tied, mouth open but unable to speak. All around were familiar faces: Ms. Walker, Teresa, Karen, all shaking their heads. The sound, echoed in the dream, shrill like metal scraping glass. Julia woke with a start, cold sweat on her neck. The clock read 3:47 a.m. In the hallway, a faint sound, Nicholas going to the bathroom, then quietly returning to his room. The boy didn't know that, from a shadowed corner, his mother had been watching him, not out of concern, but from a vague, unnamed unease. "Tomorrow night you need to dress properly, you hear me?" Julia said through clenched teeth, ironing a tiny white dress shirt. No head jerking, no excessive blinking, and absolutely no sounds. "Got it?" Nicholas stood at the bedroom doorway, fingers clutching the edge of the door. "Why, yes." "Answer clearly." "Yes, I heard you, Mom. This isn't a party with your little friends. This is James' birthday. He's the son of my boss. One weird thing from you and I lose my job. Do you understand?" The boy hung his head, eyes already red. Julia continued ironing. Each pass of the iron felt like she was trying to press out a stain of shame from the fabric. "It took me a year for Mrs. Amanda to even notice me. If she gets uncomfortable, I'm out on the street. I'll try. I promise." Julia paused, looking at the skinny boy in front of her. "No, you're not allowed to try. You have to do it. You have to be normal. I'm tired of your illness." Nicholas nodded faintly. In his head, his mother's voice repeated, "Normal, normal," as if that were the only thing worth being in this world. The next evening, Julia took him to James' mansion in the Pinecrest neighborhood, a place people like them would need generations just to dream about. At the front gate, a man in a suit stood guard, glancing at mother and son like strangers. "This way, the children's party is out in the back garden," he said, without a smile. Mrs. Amanda stood on the lawn, holding a wine glass, dressed in red, her hair pinned in a lofty bun. "Julia," she greeted with a strained smile. "And this is Nicholas?" "Yes, ma'am. He's very well behaved. He's really excited to be here today." Mrs. Amanda's eyes swept over the boy with a calculating look. Nicholas pressed his lips together, clasped his hands tightly, eyes fixed on the expensive stone tiles. "Say hello to Mrs. Amanda." Julia nudged him with her elbow. Nicholas flinched and looked up. Hello, ma'am," he said, his voice cutting awkwardly due to a tic. Mrs. Amanda frowned slightly. "Hello, dear." A blonde girl behind her suddenly shouted, "Mom! Why does that boy keep making weird noises?" Julia gave a forced laugh. He's probably just nervous. You know how kids are. Mrs. Amanda said nothing. She turned and called over a housekeeper. Take Nicholas to the back with James and the other children. But keep an eye on him. Nicholas trailed behind. Julia stayed, lingering near the fancy food table, doing her best to blend in. Barely 30 minutes later, Julia's phone rang. An unknown number. She pulled it out to answer. Hello. Mrs. Julia. This is Evelyn, the child attendant for the party. I'm sorry, but I was instructed to ask you to take Nicholas home. Julia froze. Why? He made some unusual sounds. Some of the parents were concerned. Mrs. Amanda doesn't want it to disrupt the event. A long pause followed. I'll come get him, Julia said, her voice like rotting wood. When she reached the side gate, Nicholas was already standing there. He held his jacket in his arms, didn't look at his mother, didn't cry. He just whispered, "Let's go home, Mom." Julia held his hand, not firmly. As they left the mansion grounds, neither spoke. The wind tugged at the boy's fine baby hairs. After a while, Nicholas said quietly, "I really tried, Mom. I really did." Julia didn't respond. Back home, Julia dropped her bag on the couch and opened her son's room door. Shower, then study. Nicholas said nothing, just walked to the bathroom. Julia sank into the chair, pressing her fingers to her forehead. In her mind replayed Mrs. Amanda's glance at her son like he was some strange object. The murmurs of other mothers, "What's wrong with him? He's kind of scary, isn't he? I wouldn't let my kid get too close." Each word like a thorn in her chest. That kid is not normal. A knock at the door. Julia. Is everything okay? James said Nicholas left early. It's fine. Someone just didn't want him to stay. Didn't want him? Why? They probably thought he was weird. Because of his condition. He's just a kid. Every child is different. Julia slammed her hand on the table. Not different. That's not the word they use. They think he's contagious. They said he should be in a special school. Melissa stayed silent for a moment. Then softly. But Julia, it's not his fault. Julia turned away, eyes blazing. His fault was being born like that. Melissa shook her head and left, saying nothing more. That night, Nicholas sat on his bed, scribbling in an old notebook. He wrote. Mom, I don't know what else to do. I want you to love me, like other kids' moms do. Then he scratched it out so hard the paper tore. He crumpled the page and stuffed it under his pillow. Quietly cried. The door creaked slightly open. Julia peeked in but just watched. Then closed it without stepping in, without saying a word. The night after the party, no one in the little house in Elmwood spoke another word. Julia sat at the dining table, staring at a plate of cold white rice. Nicholas stayed silent in his room, door ajar. Eat something, Julia said dryly. I'm not hungry, Nicholas replied from inside. Not hungry? Julia pushed her chair back and marched to his door. You come home from school and don't eat, come back from a party and don't eat. What do you think keeps you alive? You think people pay me to work my butt off all day so you can just sit there and say nothing? I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. If you were truly sorry, you wouldn't have embarrassed me in front of all those people. How many times do I have to tell you to stay quiet? If you can't do that, don't go. From behind the door, heavy breathing. A moment of silence, then the soft rustle of pen and paper. Julia didn't care. She went back to her room, flicked the light switch harshly, and exhaled like she had just been humiliated herself. She collapsed onto the bed. The pillow was cold, the blanket cold, and so was her heart. An hour later, As Julia lay with one arm over her forehead, eyes closed but unable to sleep, her phone buzzed. A message from Nicholas, from just a wall away, but it felt like miles. "I tried really hard, Mom." Julia unlocked the phone. "Read." "But I can't control it." Her hand stiffened. Her eyes scanned the next line. "Everyone says I'm a monster." "I know you think so too." She sat upright. "If I weren't your son, maybe you'd be happier." Julia dropped the phone onto the bed. Her heart thumped wildly. No TV, no wind, just a silence thick and dark, like a hole opening beneath her. She looked at her son's door, then back at the phone. Reopened the message. "Read each word, one by one." "I tried really hard, Mom." She repeated it in her head, like a curse. "I didn't say that," she muttered. "I didn't call him a monster. I just wanted him to be normal. What mother doesn't want her child to live a peaceful life?" She stood. 1 step. 2 steps. Then paused in front of Nicholas's door. She raised her hand, about to knock, but pulled back. "No. He needs quiet right now," she whispered. But she didn't believe herself. She returned to bed, eyes wide open. The message still displayed on the phone. Unreadable. Unerasable. The next morning, Julia made breakfast like usual. Fried eggs, toast, a warm glass of milk. She placed everything neatly on the table. Her eyes were ringed with dark circles, her face weary and pale. She knocked gently on her son's door. "Nicholas. Wake up. Breakfast is ready." No response. She knocked again. "Did you hear me?" Silence. Julia pushed the door open. Nicholas was lying in bed, facing the wall, blanket pulled up to his neck. The room was silent, no music, no light, just the musty smell of a sleepless night. "Get up. You'll be late for school." The boy stirred but didn't speak. Julia sat on the edge of the bed. "Listen to me." Nicholas remained quiet. "About yesterday." "I know. I was too harsh." He rolled over. His eyes were sunken, his skin pale, but he wasn't crying. "It's okay, Mom. I'm used to it." Julia looked at him, throat tightening. "Do you know? I only want what's best for you." Nicholas didn't nod. Didn't shake his head either. He just whispered, "I know." That afternoon, Julia stood in the supermarket bathroom where she worked. She turned on her phone. Opened her son's message again. Read it again. "Monster." She closed her eyes and leaned against the wall. For the first time in years, she felt her insides collapse like a moldy roof in the rainy season. That evening, Julia got off work earlier than usual. She stopped by the store to buy a pack of stationery paper and a fountain pen. She looked around cautiously, afraid someone she knew might see her in the office supplies aisle, as if she were doing something shameful. At home, she entered her room, shut the door, took out the paper. Sat down. But she didn't write. Not because she didn't know what to say. But because she didn't know where to begin. Every word she'd ever said now echoed in her mind like a silent courtroom. "I don't want people thinking you're crazy. I don't have a weak son. I don't need a disobedient child." Each sentence, like a whip, had lashed at her son's heart, and now they returned to tear at hers. She picked up the pen. Put it down. Picked it up again. Then placed it down once more. Finally, she stood and walked to Nicholas's room. She opened the door. Said nothing. The boy was sitting, writing something. "What are you doing?" "Writing in my journal." You do that often?" "Sometimes. When I don't know who to talk to." Julia was silent. She stood there, looking at her son, a thin, timid boy, straining to survive in a world not made for him. Do you hate me? Nicholas looked up. His eyes were red. But he shook his head. I don't hate you. I just feel sad. Julia nodded. Said nothing else. Turned and left. That night, she couldn't sleep. She opened the message again. For the 10th time. Then she tapped her own hand lightly. Tomorrow, I'll write, she whispered. Monday morning, Julia returned to Dr. Scott's old clinic. The sky was gray, misty drizzle fell lightly. The air smelled of damp earth and antiseptic. She stood outside the glass door for a long time before walking in. Inside, nothing had changed in 3 years, a worn brown leather chair in the corner, an old mahogany reception desk, and a dusty fake flower vase. Hello, how can I help you? A young nurse named Clara asked with a smile. I'm Julia Carter. I brought my son Nicholas here a few times, when he was 6. I need to see Dr. Scott. Do you have an appointment? No. But I can't wait. It's urgent. Clara glanced at the schedule. Let me ask the doctor. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Scott, still tall, balding, wearing round glasses, stepped out and recognized her immediately. Julia Carter, he said without smiling. I remember you. You remember my son? Very well. Come in. The office was quiet. Julia sat in the chair across from his wooden desk. Her hands rested on her lap but kept fidgeting. I'm not here to ask for medication, she began. I came to ask, where I went wrong. Dr. Scott tilted his head. Can you explain what you mean? My son Nicholas, he still jerks his neck, still makes strange sounds. But worse, he doesn't smile anymore. He hardly talks. The other day, he messaged me saying if he wasn't my son, maybe I'd be happier. The doctor didn't write anything down. He looked her straight in the eye. Julia blinked, forced a smile. And maybe he's right. I tried. I made him act. I banned him from doing anything weird in public. I slapped him once at the grocery store. I thought if I was strict, he'd be okay. Dr. Scott nodded slowly. You came here to ask if you were wrong? Yes. Then the answer is, yes. Julia was silent. She didn't look surprised, just slightly slumped, as if she'd taken a blow. Go on. Scott leaned back in his chair, voice calm and low. Tourette's isn't something you can discipline away. It's part of the nervous system, a reflex. Not misbehavior. Nicholas doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be accepted. You make it sound like I never cared, Julia muttered. I'm not saying that. I believe you do care. But love doesn't mean trying to change someone's core nature. Especially a child's. Julia gave a faint laugh. So what am I supposed to do? Let him tick in public? Sit still while people call him a freak? Am I supposed to smile? No. But you're supposed to be his last safe place. When the whole world turns away, he needs at least one place where he doesn't have to pretend. Julia held her head in her hand. I don't think he needs me anymore. Maybe I ruined it. Scott shook his head. He needs you. Now more than ever. Her voice cracked. I've never told him I'm proud of him. I've never hugged him when his tics were bad. I'm scared of people seeing that I have a child who's different. And because you're scared, you pass that fear onto him, the doctor said gently. He tics more not because his condition is worse, but because of the stress. Because he constantly feels his mother is ashamed to be near him. Julia closed her eyes. Tears fell. The doctor continued, slowly and clearly, you don't need to apologize to me. But if you can, please don't let Nicholas go to bed each night wondering, why can't my mom love me the way I am? When she left the clinic, Julia stood in the hallway for a long time. Cold air slipped through the window crack. Everything spun in her mind, her son's face, the sounds he couldn't control, and the doctor's aching expression as he said, "He needs a mom. Not a warden. A loving mother." She couldn't quite remember how she got home. Only that when she opened the door and saw Nicholas's small shoes placed neatly on the rug, she sank to the floor. For the first time in years, Julia didn't see her son as a burden but saw herself as the wall standing in the way of his life. Thursday. A pale yellow envelope lay quietly in the shoe cabinet drawer where Julia usually tossed her keys after work. "What's this?" she asked when she saw Nicholas holding it. "I don't know. The mailman left it with your name." Julia grabbed it. The outside read, "Lincoln Elementary School." She froze. Opened it. Her eyes scanned line by line until they stopped on a passage. Due to concerns from the parent community and the homeroom teacher of Class 6B, the school has decided to temporarily suspend student Nicholas Carter from attending classes for 2 weeks in order to reassess his adaptability and impact on the classroom environment. She dropped to the floor. Nicholas looked at her. "What's wrong, Mom?" Julia folded the letter, her voice low and flat. "Nothing. Go to your room." "Did I do something wrong?" "Go. Now." The next morning, Julia went to the school. Principal Frank Lewis received her in a room that smelled of old paper and stale coffee. "Miss Julia, I understand it must be upsetting to receive that letter." "No. You don't understand anything," Julia said through gritted teeth. "My son is being temporarily suspended just because, he's not like the others." Mr. Lewis sighed. "We don't use the word suspended. It's a temporary pause. A recommendation from several parents." Julia slammed her hand on the desk. Who said my son is a bad influence?" The door opened. A woman entered, designer dress, icy cat eyes, her blonde curls perfectly styled. "Hello, Miss Julia. I think we should speak frankly." "Mrs. Amanda." Julia jumped to her feet. "It was you?" "Yes. I filed the petition. And not just me, 16 other parents as well." Julia's voice was sharp. "And for what?" "Because your son makes the other children uncomfortable. He makes noises, jerks his head during class. One child imitated him at home and the parents got concerned. This is a school, not group therapy." Julia let out a bitter laugh. "You talk like he's some kind of infectious virus." "No one said that. But if you must know, yes, your child belongs in a more suitable environment. Somewhere with specialists. My son is not crazy. No, but he's different. And that difference can't be forced upon others. We have children who need a calm space to learn." Principal Lewis tried to intervene. "Please, let's all remain calm. This is not a courtroom." Julia didn't hear him. Her eyes blazed. "You're ashamed of my son because he's different? Is this because he was asked to leave your precious birthday party?" Mrs. Amanda answered coolly, "I did what I had to do to protect the group. Maybe you should do the same for your own son." Julia clenched her fists. Then turned to the principal. "Whose side are you on?" Mr. Lewis looked down, his voice softer. "We have to listen to the majority. But this is only a temporary measure." Julia didn't stay to hear the rest. She stormed out of the office, her heart pounding like a war drum. The glass doors in the hallway reflected her face darkened by fury and humiliation. As she passed the classrooms, she heard whispers. "What's wrong with that kid?" "Yeah, I heard he got kicked out. He scared my friend the other day, made her cry." She stopped. Her heart shattered. All the things Nicholas had never told her now revealed themselves, no words needed. Across the hall, she saw Nicholas walking with James. The two walked silently. When Nicholas saw her, he flinched. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Let's go home," Julia said. "But I still have math class." Julia knelt and pulled her son into a hug. "It's okay. Come home with me." For the first time in months, Nicholas didn't ask why. On the bus ride home, Julia held her son's backpack. She looked out the window. The world passed by in reverse, but the shame on her shoulders only moved forward. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" Nicholas asked. "For letting you be treated like that, and not knowing." He gave a faint smile. "I'm used to it." Julia looked at the boy beside her. Messy hair, tired eyes. He had never talked back, never shouted. But every time he forced his tics down, it was like part of his soul was being suffocated. When they got home, Julia pulled out her phone and found Dr. Scott's number. "Doctor," she said, her voice shaking. "I need you to refer me to a therapist. Not for my son, for me." There was a pause on the other end. Then gently, "I'll send you the information. And Julia, thank you for calling." That night, Julia sat alone in the kitchen. On the table, Nicholas's school records, the letter from the school, and a small, worn notebook she'd found in his room. She opened it. The first line, written in shaky handwriting. "If I didn't tick, maybe Mom would be happy." Julia closed the notebook. And broke down crying. No more rage. No more pretending. Just the collapse of someone who had imprisoned her emotions for far too long. The wall of judgment that had surrounded the two of them for years was starting to crack. But the most terrifying part was realizing she had built it herself. After receiving the suspension letter, Julia didn't sleep through a single night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her son's face, his messy hair, his deep, sad eyes, and that shy smile she hadn't seen in months. One early Sunday morning, she sat at his desk, holding a pen but unable to write. Thoughts swirled, guilt and love entangled, leaving her paralyzed. At last, she put the pen down, sighed, and whispered to herself, "You need your mom. I have to do something for you." She took a blank sheet of paper, the only one she dared to use, and began. "My dear son," she wrote, her hand trembling. "I know I've hurt you so much these past days. I used words, looks, and anger without ever thinking about how you felt." She remembered the look in Nicholas's eyes as he walked home in the dark, with no one waiting for him. She remembered the stifled sobs in the bathroom, where he tried to hide both his outer and inner wounds. Her voice echoed softly, like a confession. "Do you know, I was wrong. I was too harsh, too selfish, and I made you carry it all. But do you know what else? I love you. More than anything in this world." Julia paused, looking out the window. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains, as if trying to light every dark corner of her heart. She continued. "I'm sorry for not hugging you when you needed it most. For not holding your hand when you blinked or made a sound you couldn't control. I won't let you be alone anymore." Soft footsteps approached. Julia turned. Nicholas stood in the doorway, silent but filled with hope. "Were you writing me a letter?" he asked quietly. Julia nodded with a faint smile. "Yes. I wrote it for you." Nicholas walked into the room, placed his hand on her shoulder, and whispered, "I've been waiting a long time for that apology." Julia couldn't speak. She pulled her son into her arms, letting the tears flow freely. In that warm embrace, Nicholas no longer hid his tics. He let his eyes blink, let the sounds escape naturally, freely, as a part of who he was. "Mom," he whispered, "you'll hold my hand through every tic, every stare from people, right?" Julia squeezed his hand. "Yes, my love. I'll always be with you." The next morning, Julia left the letter on Nicholas's desk before quietly walking out, not wanting to wake him. Later, she found him asleep at the desk, the letter still clutched in his hand. When he woke, he smiled for the first time in months. His eyes sparkled with a new light of hope. Julia couldn't help herself. She ran to him, wrapping him in a hug. For the first time, without hiding, without shame, and without silencing the tick. "I'm proud of you, Nicholas," she said, her voice overflowing with love. Life would still be hard. But this time, they wouldn't be facing it alone. After that letter, mother and son began a conversation, silent, but powerful and full of understanding. One afternoon, Julia called Nicholas to sit beside her. "Is there something you want to tell me?" she asked. Nicholas hesitated, then spoke softly. "I want you to know. I'm not just the ticks. I'm me with everything that comes with it." Julia nodded. "I know, and I'll always support you no matter what." "I want to try beatboxing," he said, his eyes glowing. "I learned it from James. It helps me control my tics." Julia smiled, her heart full of hope. "That's wonderful. I'll come watch you perform." Day by day, Nicholas practiced beatboxing. The sounds he created from his throat blended with his tics, forming a unique symphony. Julia stood beside him, sometimes patting his shoulder, cheering him on with all her heart. One afternoon, while Julia and Nicholas were walking in the park, they ran into James and his mother, Melissa. "Hi Julia, hi Nicholas." Melissa greeted cheerfully. "I heard your son's going to perform beatboxing at school." Nicholas blushed and stammered, "Why yes, ma'am." Julia smiled proudly. "My son's been working so hard." Melissa looked at Julia warmly. "We should organize a little rehearsal for the kids, help them build confidence." Julia nodded. "That's a great idea." Other parents around began to notice the change in Nicholas. No longer the quiet, timid boy, he was becoming a confident child who shined under the stage lights. 3 months later, the school hosted an event called Confidence Day. Julia signed Nicholas up to perform his beatboxing. That day, the school stage sparkled with lights. The auditorium was packed with students, all eyes curious and attentive. As Nicholas stepped onto the stage, his eyes shone. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his steps were steady. He began to perform, rhythmic sounds mixing with his natural tics, creating a one-of-a-kind melody. At first, the crowd was silent. Then slowly, they were drawn in. Applause erupted through the hall. Julia stood beneath the stage, eyes brimming with tears. When her son finished, she rushed forward and hugged him tightly. "This is my son," she told the audience, "and I'm proud of him." In the crowd, Mrs. Amanda quietly lowered her head, saying nothing. Mother and son left the stage together, under soft lights, not perfect, but free and truly themselves. Julia looked at Nicholas, eyes filled with love and promise. "You did it, and I'll always be by your side." Nicholas smiled. For the first time, he wasn't afraid. After that proud performance, the atmosphere at Lincoln School began to shift in a way no one expected. The whispers that once followed Nicholas were replaced by admiration, or at least, respectful silence. Julia felt the difference as soon as she stepped into class with her son. "I didn't think Nicholas could do that," Ms. Paula, the literature teacher, whispered to a colleague. "That was incredible progress." Julia heard and smiled to herself. She walked to Nicholas and held his hand with pride. "You did great, my son," she said, her eyes gleaming. Nicholas looked up, his smile radiant, his eyes sparkling like stars. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice soft but steady. Not long after, Mrs. Amanda, the very woman who had pushed for Nicholas's suspension, showed up at the principal's office, tense and displeased. Julia was called in to meet her. "Julia," Mrs. Amanda began, her voice sharp, "I'd like to speak frankly." Julia met her with a calm smile and eyes full of conviction. "So would I, Mrs. Amanda. I saw my son on that stage. And I'm proud of him." Mrs. Amanda scowled. "Your son, Those sounds he makes, they're not appropriate for a serious academic environment. Julia shrugged, her tone composed. Nicholas is his true self, and there's nothing wrong with that. Every child deserves to be themselves. Meanwhile, Nicholas was practicing with James and his new friends. The schoolyard had become their afternoon rehearsal space. Feeling more confident now? James asked Nicholas. Yeah, I feel really happy, Nicholas replied, eyes shining. And my mom came to see me perform too. James grinned. That's awesome. Your mom's really cool. One day, during recess, Julia received an unexpected phone call. It was Principal Lewis. Julia, he said, I want to apologize for what happened before. The school would like to welcome Nicholas back as a regular student. We'll offer all the support we can. Julia exhaled deeply, her voice filled with emotion. Thank you, Principal. Thank you for giving my son this chance. In class, Nicholas's presence was no longer a source of awkward gossip. Instead, the other children began to understand and appreciate him. His tics became something he accepted freely and even incorporated into his impressive beatbox performances during extracurricular activities. One day, Ms. Paula called Julia in. I just want to say that Nicholas has inspired so many of his classmates, she said. He's shown us that being different can be powerful. Julia smiled, eyes misty. My son has changed and so have I. This story wasn't only about Nicholas. It was also about Julia, a brave mother who recognized her mistakes and chose unconditional love. Through therapy, Julia learned how to understand her child, how to listen to him, and to her own feelings. One day, during a session, she told the therapist, I used to think being strict was the only way to help my son. But now I know love is the greatest strength. The therapist smiled. Exactly, Julia. Love and acceptance are the keys to healing. On a warm evening, Julia and Nicholas sat by the window, looking up at a sky full of stars. Mom, Nicholas said, I'm not afraid anymore. I know you'll always be there. Julia held him close, tears streaming down her face. I'm not afraid anymore either, sweetheart. We'll face everything together. Life grew gentler. Challenges still came, but now Julia and Nicholas had found strength in love and acceptance. At a small party celebrating Nicholas's success, Melissa and James were there too, laughing with the group, helping to write a new story, one with no more walls, no more judgment. In a quiet corner of the room, Mrs. Amanda stood silently, watching the joy around her, her heart heavy with regret. She knew she had been wrong and now, all she could do was wait for forgiveness. The story of Julia and Nicholas teaches us that unconditional love and empathy are the keys to healing emotional wounds. Prejudice and stigma only deepen the suffering of those already vulnerable, while acceptance and companionship help them discover their self-worth and the strength to overcome. Every person deserves respect and love, no matter their differences or limitations. Family, especially parents, play a crucial role in building that trust and confidence in their children.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.